Chainsaw Man started off with a bang, taking the manga world by storm with its fast-paced action, crazy powers, devils, relatable characters, and then it stopped. Fujimoto took a year-long break to write two masterpieces back-to-back. Then the Chainsaw Man anime was announced, and the manga came back, with part 2 having a really promising start. So what happened to all of the Chainsaw Man hype in the past few years? The anime's hype was short-lived. Despite the great effort MAPPA put into animating it, the end product ended up being controversial in the community for its cinematic approach style and dull color choices. Many people, especially in Japan, felt like this sort of artistic direction did not fit the frenetic and offbeat style of the manga, to the point of boycotting its sales. The anime only being 12 episodes long also did not help at all. The movie, however, looks really good, and there's a trailer out already and updated character designs, and from the looks of it, the common complaints seem to have been fixed, but only time will tell for sure. But what about the manga? Like I've said before, part 2 started off really promising. Fujimoto improved his art, he introduced an interesting female character, who was actually the main point of view for most of the initial arcs, and things seemed to be going well, and yet the sales kept declining. And fans grew more and more dissatisfied as time went on. Not all of them, of course, but the small portion of disappointed fan base kept growing more and more over the years. Let's go over some of the reasons why this could be. Let's see if Chainsaw Man really did fall off. And while we do that, you can sub and like the video if you're enjoying yourself so far. I've got plenty more like this one coming. Now, let's analyze part 2, point by point, and at the end of each of them, I'll give my thoughts on whether part 2 improved, stayed consistent, or got worse than part 1. Let's start. Point number 1 is the characters. Part 2 introduced many new characters, more notably Asa, Mitaka, the War Devil, who are actually our point of view characters for roughly the first half of part 2. I always thought that Chainsaw Man was a story for boys made by a grown-ass 30-year-old man. But that isn't surprising, considering that it's a shonen, and the point that I'm trying to make is that the themes and the problems that Denji faced were very male-centric at times. So having a female character also shifted the focus of the story in a way. And I think Fujimoto really nailed it when it comes to Asa. I've seen a lot of negative comments about her. Some were purely due to the fact that people, understandably, wanted Denji back, but others weren't convinced by the character writing. Some of the most common complaints I've seen is that she tries too hard to appeal to the "I'm not like the other girls" stereotype. And even though I'm not a girl, clearly, I personally find her relatable. I went through a lot of the same problems she's going through in my adolescent years, minus having a horseman devil taking over my body, of course. And I find her to be a really good complementing character to Denji. They both have their own set of problems to deal with, and I think it's a really good thing for the manga to be able to explore different facets of how an individual can struggle to live in society. It makes her all the more relatable for a greater number of people. And the rest of the cast also has a lot of good additions, most of which still haven't shown their full potential, and there's of course returning characters from part 1, which are always nice to see. But I'm still waiting on you, Kishibe. Where are you, man? Most of the cast still hasn't reached the Aki and Power tier for me, except for maybe Asa, which is definitely up there, Nayuta as well, who's probably my favorite part 2 character, and, spoiler warning, I felt like her death was a waste. I hated losing her as much as I hated losing Power and Aki, but I never felt the emotional weight of her death because of how sudden it was, and I know that was kinda the point, but it still felt like a huge waste to me. Okay, spoilers done, you can come back. As for the rest, none of them would elicit any kind of strong reaction out of me if we were to see them die. But I think they do have potential to get there someday. And remember, we are still talking about an unfinished story here. All in all, I would say that the quality of part 2's characters compared to part 1 is, drumroll, consistent. Yeah. Characters like Asa, Nayuta and Yoru, and even Fami with these latest chapters, if you know you know, they're on the same level as part 1 characters to me. However, it's the side cast that is a lot less memorable, but I gotta say, I love the latest 2 additions and I really hope they become recurring characters. Now, with the first main point out of the way, let's get to the second one, the pacing. The pacing is the main notable difference between these 2 parts. I introduced Chainsaw Man in this video as a high-octane, fast-paced, quirky type of story, and while part 1 definitely fits this description, part 2 has a slower pacing and a bigger emphasis on characters. However, most of the quality character time and moments went to Denji, Asa, and a little bit of Nayuta, and the sidecast was mostly left behind. And I'm not acting like part 1's sidecast was deeply developed or anything, but I feel like they were way more memorable and fun. I'm sure we all remember Himeno, Kishibe, Kobeni, Beam, and Angel very fondly. But back to the pacing. I'm not against the slower pacing at all. The problem arises when you're a weekly reader, getting 16 pages every week when you're lucky, or every 2 weeks when you're not, which is most of the time. It doesn't help that Fujimoto's way of paneling stayed the exact same as part 1, so the flow of reading is still super fast, due to the minimal dialogue and big, huge panels, which are sometimes repeated to show a change in a character's expression. Now, I love his way of paneling, that's not the issue at all. But reading it weekly or even bi-weekly, with the pacing he decided to go with, is a little tough, for sure. We've definitely heard plenty of people saying that Chainsaw Man is better binged, and I definitely agree with that. Now, compared to part 1, I'd say the pacing is actually better. Yeah, I'm a big fan of letting the story breathe more, especially because the pacing still feels really fast when you binge it. The action chapters can be read in under 10 seconds, I'm not even kidding. It retained the frenetic aspects of part 1 while still incorporating slower elements, so I think that's an improvement. Now, on to the third point, which might be one of the most controversial. The story. And in fact, the story is the thing that I'm most conflicted about. Not because I don't like it, but because even now that part 2 has officially reached part 1's chapter count, I still don't know how to feel about it or where it's going. I definitely know what it's trying to tell me, since the core message has stayed the same since part 1. In my opinion, Chainsaw Man is a story about struggle. It shows you how no matter how much shit you're going through, you can always find a reason to keep going. And the reason being, the hope that you can one day find happiness. And this core message hasn't changed in part 2. This theme is pretty much still present, just like a lot of things from part 1 actually. In fact, it feels like Fujimoto is basically taking the core skeleton of part 1 and using it again, this time trying his best to expand upon it. To many, it feels like he's just telling the same story again, and that he's out of ideas, while others think that there's a point to all of this. I still don't know exactly which camp I belong to, and that's exactly why I have trouble determining how I feel about part 2's story so far. It definitely feels like it has potential for greatness, but we are always in the waiting for the payoff phase, without ever getting it. A constant state of let him cook, without ever getting to see the actual meal. But then again, it's an unfinished story and I might change my mind on it completely in a matter of months, either positively or negatively. Even though I like most of it, I still have to compare it to part 1, and I'm actually gonna say that it's worse. My reasoning is that even though I enjoyed most of it, there were still plot elements and arcs that I wasn't too crazy about, like the Chainsaw Man church stuff. However, the latest plot twist was pretty crazy and it seems like we're nearing some sort of climax, so depending on how it goes, this might surpass part 1. But now, let's talk about one of the most controversial points. The art. It's clear to everyone that Fujimoto's art changed a lot from his part 1 days. It's normal, it happens to every famous mangaka with a long-running series, it's nothing new. And I've said it already that part 2 started off with a bang. Fujimoto seemed to have leveled up his art skills after his 2 one-shots, which also contained amazing artwork. But at some point, burnout must have set in because not only he started taking more and more breaks, but the art quality also took a massive nosedive. The main culprit of this was his overuse of thick lines. Before, he used to change the line thickness for each different section of his drawings, but it seems like at some point he got tired of that and decided to make them all thick, all of them. And this, in my opinion, just made the drawings feel flatter and less dynamic, and it just conveyed a general sense of laziness. I'm not blaming him, a mangaka's life is hard enough as it is, so I support them doing anything they can in order to make it easier, that's not the problem. And the thick line phase seems to be over now. I think he settled for a really nice style actually. The latest chapters have all looked really good, so I think he definitely recovered. Lines are still generally thicker than part 1 on average, but he seems to have brought back thinner lines as well. Even when his art was at its worst, the action scenes, paneling and choreography were still all enjoyable and intense as they've always been. So I'm actually gonna say that part 2's art is the same quality as part 1. In some moments, it even exceeded it. Sometimes it got worse, so I think that balances out pretty well. And finally, the answer to the question you have all been waiting for. Did Chainsaw Man fall off with part 2? The answer is... drumroll... not yet. Maybe it's a bit of an unsatisfying answer, but this is how I'm feeling about it. Like I said, there's plenty of things that part 2 does better, and plenty of things it does worse. Judgment is still suspended on a lot of things, since we haven't seen all the payoffs in the story, which can potentially reach higher peaks than part 1. Either that, or they can crash and burn like most mangas do towards the ending. I hope not, fingers crossed. So I highlighted most of the reasons why the general community thinks Chainsaw Man fell off. I don't agree with them, but I can kinda see their point. It's a very different story, different and very similar at the same time, so maybe that can cause a bit of alienation. Definitely make more videos on Chainsaw Man in the future to expand my points further, and once part 2 ends, I'll drop a definitive comparison video, so subscribe and stay tuned. Thank you for watching, press the like if you enjoyed, follow me on my socials where I'll talk about anime and manga. You can even DM me if you want, for whatever reason. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section. Did you think Chainsaw Man fell off? Do you agree or disagree with my reasoning? Let me know. It's been Alex, bye bye.